long-term papers living in three drawers, two file cabinets, and one random grocery bag? Or maybe you're clinging to an over-engineered file cabinet full of proof that you are an adult. Either way, you're looking for a change and wondering, why is this so hard? If so, you're not alone. You are just ready for a better system. Today, we're finishing our paper organization series by walking through how to organize your long-term paperwork using our five-step method: mindset, declutter, organize, optimize, maintain. We will be taking a field trip and we will be talking about long-term papers and outline what we have found to be the simplest filing method.
If we haven't met before, my name's Adrian,
And I'm Mary.
and together we've created this community called Life a Go-Go for over 5 years, almost six now, Mary. And we recently started here on YouTube to reach a larger audience. We're a community of women who are looking to improve their lives one week at a time and also make some friends along the way. We share tips about organization, productivity, and general life hacks. So we'd love it if you would hit the like button and subscribe below. All right, so Mary, like you said, today we're talking about long-term papers, but what are long-term papers? It was actually hard when we were planning this video to come up with a definition. Like we just assume we know what it is, but why do we have long-term papers, right? And so what
Mhm.
we came up with was that these are papers that we use for proof and we also refer back to for information. So it's beneficial to have because it makes it easy to find that information that we're looking at. But worst case scenario, you could live without them. So, for example, taxes. Like we need to keep our taxes and proof of our taxes. But if the file cabinet erupted, we would just have to explain that to the IRS, right? Same things with like college transcripts or car repairs. Like it's nice to know when did we have those car repairs done, but if we didn't have it, we would be able to get the car still repaired.
Mhm.
These are not as important as like the emergency binder papers, right? We don't need the papers in our long-term file to put our life back together. We would be able to find them from other places, or we would just be able to move on without it. With the emergency binder papers that we talked about in a previous video, we're really looking for things like your wills, your trust, the deeds to your house. Those things are really critical to you and your financial and your home's well-being.
Yeah.
We're also not going to talk about research or like paper projects. Some people like to do their genealogy, or maybe you have a lot of ancestry information, and those are papers that you might store in a file cabinet, but they're not really like the long-term papers that we're going to be talking about. The same thing with memories. Like you might not have a lot of memories and you could stick them in your file cabinet, but other people have huge memory bins and scrapbooks and everything. So those again are kind of going to be a little bit separate from here. And obviously we're not talking about business papers. So when you're dealing with business paper, it is a whole different animal. Like just insurance policies, for
Mhm.
example. As an individual, yes, somebody got injured on your property, you only need to keep that document for the year. When your homeowners renews, you print off the new document and you can toss the old one. Businesses, you need to keep that document for like ever, So
Mhm.
it's very different, and we're not going to be talking about that at all. We'll talk a little bit about the research and project later on, but we're not talking at all about business papers.
But what we are going to talk about, and first off, is mindset. We always have started with mindset. So before we even touch a single folder, we need to really reset the way we think about paper, long-term paper.
Mhm.
First, no one really ever taught any of us how to organize long-term papers. I mean, maybe you copied what your parents did. Maybe you brought some habits home from your corporate or office work days. Maybe you kept everything because it just felt safer.
Mhm.
But at work, you were paid to keep all of those meticulous records. At home, we are not running a records department. So, somewhere along the way, many of us absorbed some ideas that a full file cabinet means I'm responsible. But that's just not true. You can file once a year. You can have just one small file box of long term papers. You can keep broad categories. This all still counts as being organized.
Yeah, absolutely. And another mindset piece of this, Mary, is that it just feels so heavy, right? Whenever we're thinking
Mhm.
about paper, your brain's just like, no, thank you. Let's go do anything and everything else, right? And
Yes.
Unfortunately, unlike with other organizing, if you were to open a file cabinet drawer and you decluttered the paperwork and you put it in the right categories, it still don't look like a file drawer with files in it, right? You're not going to get that
Mm-hmm.
huge dopamine rush that you would get if you were organizing your closet or your entryway or something like that. So
Mm-hmm.
there's it feels like a lot of work for a little reward in your mind, although there is high value in it because you have that peace of knowing where everything is and that you're not carrying any extra burdens. But
Mm-hmm.
there's also that fear and avoidance. And again, we talked about this in the mindset video that we started the series with, but most of us are keeping papers because of fear. And a lot of this has changed with our society, right? Like we now have a lot of stuff virtually, it's easier to find records, we don't need to keep as many papers. But we worry and we keep thinking, but what if someday, what if something happens and I don't have the proof? And I think TV kind of has helped us, right? What people do on TV, they have the big file cabinet and they're like, I found the random piece of proof. But let's be practical. That's really probably not happening. And in all the years that we have been organizing, it's very seldom that someone needs a random paper that they threw away.
Not
Like
one time.
suddenly calling back, being like, oh my gosh, if only I had that paper.
Mm-hmm.
Again, most papers replaceable. You can go on without it. We're really putting that pressure on ourselves. And we don't want you to take us the wrong way here at all. We are not pressuring you to get rid of anything that you truly want to keep or anything that you truly think that you might need to have. We're just trying to ask as gently as possible, or maybe a little bit more as bluntly as possible. But do you really need 10 years of utility bills, right? Do you need every statement from a bank account that you closed 5 years ago? Do you want to have every magazine article that you've ever pulled out? Like, people aren't even using Jello molds anymore. We gotta clean out the recipes. We're trying to make decisions for today's reality, not yesterday's anxiety.
So that brings us to the decluttering step. And that's where we really need to get practical. We are holding on to papers for an information emergency that probably won't happen, but we're creating a daily emergency of stress and anxiety from too many pieces of paper. So if you have your papers everywhere or a true black backlog, please watch our earlier videos where we help you quickly sort through them. Most likely, though, your papers are in some type of filing system now, and what you need is to go through and declutter the old papers, which can be done fairly quickly by sorting by timeline, closed accounts, information for items that you don't own, all of those things. Easy, easy win to get rid of.
Yeah, and very quick to do so. We also recommend that you either declutter or you move the research and paper projects that you want to have to like a separate container or a separate drawer. And then ideally label that. So you could even label it like non-important paper, just so that you know and anyone else who may have to go through your paper knows that there's no key information in there. Also, if you have a large volume of paper that you don't usually add to or you don't need to reference often, we recommend that you move those as well. So these are things like supporting tax documents, especially if you are itemizing, you sometimes have a large amount of paper with that. Or if you have a child or yourself that has IEP paperwork related to school and learning, you may want to move these into a separate cabinet, drawer, etc. Having this large volume of paper in your main long-term filing cabinet or drawer, it'll just make it harder to put information away. And it's also make it harder to find key information and just harder to get started because you have all this paper, right? So we just recommend that you separate those out. And finally, another key issue that holds people back when it comes to decluttering or just even getting started with a long-term box is that you probably have brought a system in the past. And a lot of these systems are very, very complex, like the file tickler system and the, color code everything systems. Like they're very complex. So you probably brought them and you started to put some of your paper in there, and then you're like, oh, this is a lot, and you went on with your life. And so now you have some paper in these files, some not, some's loose. So as you're going through, we recommend that you try to declutter these complex systems, and we'll actually show you how we recommend that you stick to something much simpler.
which now leads you to the next step, organize. So for long-term papers, we recommend that you have a container that can hold files, and this can be a file cabinet if you want it to be, or a file box like the one that Adrian uses, or something similar. Then just buy basic file folders to sort papers into. And when you have too many file folders or too complex of a system, the long-term filing will break down. Because really, who wants to file? Even when I was paid to do it, I didn't want to do it. So when we talked about home organization, we referenced the clutter bug styles. And one of the questions was, do you want the item to be easy to put away or easy to find? Well, when it comes to long-term files, the answer is easy to put away. Now, remember, your papers don't need to be perfect. We find broad categories are so much better, like vehicle information instead of one for each vehicle, and then each car under it has a finance file, a repairs file. Broad categories make it filing fast and simple.
Okay, great. I also moved my candle, Mary, so I don't catch my long-term files on files of fire.
Please, let's not have a fire. Yes, no.
Okay, so let's go on that field trip that we promised you into our files so you can see an example of how this looks in real life. Because my files are all in this handy dandy file box that I think they're like $10 now at Walmart. This is so old I probably got it for 5. But it's just a basic plastic box. It has a lid to protect the files, you know. It's all you really need in life. I'm going to walk through my long-term paper system because it's much easier than Mary's, and we'll put Mary's beautiful file cabinet up so you can see what she's dealing with. But Mary, as I'm going through this, maybe you could just share like what's different of the files that I kept than yours or what you have in yours, if that makes sense. And again,
Yeah.
no two people are going to have the same long-term file system. It's just more the principles working for you. Um, so let's dive in. So again, my box, oh God, it's full, it's heavy. The thing's a little bit of a beast. Mary, can you see it?
Oh, yes.
Guys, remember, we're
Very
new to
impressive.
this. We're new to this YouTube. Leave us a like. We're trying. Um, so in my file box, Mary, I have the first thing I have is manuals. So I have a very old house. We think it's almost 200 years or will be soon. Um,
Wow.
and so I have an E-track that's older than me. So like we probably could not replace this manual easily online, right?
Mhm.
So modern day, you can Google it. This one we kept. So I do have that. I have my car manual in here. And then I have a car folder. And it just basically has like the purchasing papers. It doesn't have the title. That's in my emergency binder.
Mhm.
But it has like it just proof like when we transfer titles from different states that we had the vehicles in and that we paid the
Mhm.
right taxes and that kind of stuff. And then I have a folder for credit cards and debt agreements. So um, when you get a credit card and you sign up and it's like, oh, here's like the reward points that come with it, or if you get a zero
Mhm.
interest, how many months. I just like to keep that in here. I know the terms change so fast and that, everything gets updated, but I just like to have that as a reference to go back to. And then I have one that's called like House Financials, and this has some weird stuff in it, Mary. But basically, it has like when we get our escrow account from our loan holder, our mortgage holder.
Mhm.
And then I also have like we had like a landfill where we didn't take the settlement. So if I guess we get negatively impacted by having a landfill in town, we have that paperwork in here.
Okay.
I have all the stuff about my HSA accounts, which is our medical accounts. So it just kind of keeps the receipt policies in here and the account itself. And then I
Mhm.
have my insurance paperwork, some bank and retirement information. I have past medical information. So if it's current medical, I kind of keep it up here. But these are just back labs and stuff. Like if I need them, I have them.
Mhm.
I do have a file on my pets. So, and I think Mary, you have a file on your pet too. Mine
Yes.
is more just like the vaccination history because our pets are pretty young still. And then I have a folder, and it's actually labeled Mary. I pulled out here. So let me show you to you. Can you see it? It's actually labeled, oh, there with washi tape of some sort. It says retirement 2022. I never updated the file label, but guess what? It just has all my retirement information in it. We're
There you go.
good. And then I have home repairs in mind. Contracts and warranties. Most likely all of those are home related, but we do have a few purchases like furniture purchases that are in there. And then I
Hmm.
have I have just a few papers regarding like my grandmother's estate information. That's long settled now, but just in case, just holding on to it for a few more years. So that,
Hmm.
Mary, is my file cabinet. What I'm not showing you here is again everything in my emergency binder, which we talked about. But I
Hmm.
also have a piece of file furniture like you do, Mary. It's
Hmm.
just like a cute little dresser. And in that bottom drawer, I keep all my tax documents just because they're so big.
Hmm.
You know, this entrepreneur lifestyle really increases the amount of papers you need to keep.
Love the papers from the trees. Yes, we're cutting down trees left and right with paper.
So you didn't give
Well,
much feedback during the presentation, Mary, but what about you? What do you have different or the same?
yeah, sorry about that. I was like, wow, that's cool. The first thing you mentioned was manuals, and I thought that's interesting because I don't keep them in my file furniture that you'll see shortly. I actually have a household binder,
Okay.
and in that binder, actually, there's two of them at this point. I keep any manuals, receipts with warranties. If I have stuff, large rugs clean, the cost of that and the receipts from that. That's what, let's see what else. I keep it when we buy if we buy a larger piece of furniture, I keep the receipts and the dimensions for that. So those are the things that I keep that you keep in your binder, but I have a household binder for that.
Mm.
So those don't stay in my file box. And then for taxes, I have two of these. I have one for work and I have one for personal. And anything that involves taxes, because stuff comes in all year long for taxes. For me, like you, do my entrepreneur thing. They get dropped right in that envelope with its own snap. Each has, blue one for personal and green one for work.
Oh, that's
And
interesting because yeah, I guess when I was talking about taxes during the presentation here, I was actually thinking about like previous years, like they're gone and filed and, the returns through, hopefully.
oh
Um,
yeah,
versus like active paper. But yeah, you could definitely keep your tax documents in your long-term box until you're ready to file if you wanted to.
that is true. And I keep mine in a different place completely from you. Of course, I've also been alive a lot longer than you have. I think I've been alive almost 50% longer than you have. So I got these years ago. I got them at the Dollar Tree. I got like as many as they would let me buy. These are these file boxes. And on the outside, on the top, I'll have the tax year and the number of returns. And so I file all of my returns with the supporting documentation in these file boxes. And I also keep a box just like this for all of the wills that have already been filed in my family. So I have my parents, my mother's, my father's, and my aunts, all their wills that have already been filed. Now, the reason why I don't keep them in emergency binders is because they've already been filed. These people have passed away. It's been filed with the county. If necessary, I could get a copy of the will from the clerk of court easily. But I happen to have to access them. These are long-term papers because I have to access them fairly frequently because we're in the middle of something that requires me to check property rights and that type of thing. So that's where I keep those. Everything else that's I don't keep in the emergency binder, I keep in my file cabinet that I think you have a picture of.
Yeah.
So, and that includes, I have a file marked home, and that within that I have the escrow and the when we originally bought the house and all the things. I have something marked vehicle, and then I have the four different vehicles separated within that, and then I keep, you don't, but I do. I keep the records of maintenance and repairs. And then I keep all of my investments and I throw everything in a basket and then sort it probably once a year to put it all in its proper long term, which is also in those file boxes. Because that's things, if something happened to it, I can get it from the investment firm,
Yeah,
Most of
it's more like you want to have it just so you could look back and see how they've been performing or when
yeah.
you sold something or whatever.
I'm a little bit of a geek. I geek out on I like to look at the history.
Yeah.
Things have shifted and changed for my 401ks and a few other things. And so for me, I keep them for a reason because I really want to track certain things. But if you're not geeking out on that, you can certainly only keep the
Absolutely.
quarterlies. I have senior pets. So I keep the rabies stuff in the emergency binder because if you ever have to relocate, they need to have proof of rabies for your animals. But I keep all of their blood work, any surgeries they've had because they are now both 12. They're getting up there. And so the last time we did blood work versus what the blood work looks like now, that type of thing, you know.
Yeah. And you mentioned for the vehicles, Mary, that you keep the work that's been done on your vehicle. And that's really important when you have a warranty, especially like if you have the engine
Mhm.
warranty and stuff still, and you don't necessarily get it done at the same dealership or whatever. For us, we don't keep it because our vehicles are very old. So, like, we have the same mechanic. They do everything by text now if we ever really had a question on it. But for us, it's more like, yep, that part's old. And of course, I have the benefit of having a husband who's very car savvy, right?
There you go.
Yeah, I think that that is interesting because I do have like a tire warranty, but again, it's in their system, so I just never really worried about it. But everybody has different needs, and again, that's why
Right.
we wanted to share our differences in the file cabinets.
And then I had an entire drawer. My children both had IEPs, and I had an entire file drawer that is their school records because that includes the IEPs, all of the testing, all of the in-classroom testing, evaluations, external evaluations. Yeah, like you said, I had a whole drawer. It was separate.
Yeah, and you have to keep those married because your
Mhm.
children are still very young and they still are deciding, whether they want to go on to higher education or not, where
Right.
they
Yeah.
could use that information, right?
Right. They would build off of the one they had in high school to if they need any accommodations for community college or college or university. Yeah.
Yeah. We're not trying to say you're a paper hoarder, Mary.
No,
These are
there's
essential
reasons why.
documents. But that is also like another point that we made. Like it's a whole drawer for your IEPs. And it's probably like, granted, yours are in little fancy boxes, but it's probably a whole drawer for all your tax and your family
Mhm.
estate information. And if that's in where you're actively putting your files, it's going to keep you from doing that. So that's why we actually have naturally separated ours out. But we
Mhm.
find that that's really helpful for you and for our clients in the real world, in the non-YouTube space world.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. Mine is a bit more complicated than yours, but I also have, four people in the house and more
Yeah.
animals than I care to count.
What's
No, go on.
interesting, Mary, is that most of ours actually we have the same categories. Like, we do have completely different paper needs, but we still have a lot of the same broad categories and kind of taking the same approach to the filing.
Yeah, I noticed that because you were talking about like the credit card agreements. I have that. Memberships, when you join like Costco or
Mhm.
BJ's or whatever, we have a file that just says memberships, and that could be anything from, Costco to the gym. One thing I don't have is miscellaneous. I do not have a miscellaneous file. I think that's a really bad idea. It becomes a catch-all for whatever you don't want to deal with, and that's not helping your process.
Yeah. Another key system, Mary, that I found that really helps, and I guess this is kind of more in the organizing, but also in the maintenance phase, is I like to have what I call like an in-between holding container. So you need a place to corral incoming papers that you want to file, but you don't necessarily want to go file every time a paper comes into your house, right? That's just totally not realistic. So that's
Mhm.
kind of why I call it the in-between container. For me, I personally use a slash pocket, but you can definitely use a two pocket folder or whatever these envelopes are called. Like Mary, you showed one yourself earlier. Like these are great. And as
Right.
papers come in, you just throw your paper in here. Eventually, once this is full and you can't get any more paper in, then that's kind of your trigger to file. And what I found as an added bonus is that when I go through the paper the second time, right? Because recency is we know like if we have something in our hand, we're like, oh, that's important. But when I go through the second time, I'll be like, oh, I returned that item. Or I don't know why I kept this paper. I don't know what I was thinking that day. Or like with the investment statements, you get one every month and then you get one quarterly. If you just care about the quarterly, you can just double check and throw out almost like 40 pages of paper. Those things are fat. So
Mhm.
Fortunately, that doesn't mean you're rich. It just means they send you a lot of paper. But I like to have something like this because then when I'm doing my active paper and I come across something, I throw it in there. I don't have to get up. I don't have to go to the file cabinet. It's not a big to do. And you could take this out as long as you want. Like Clutterbug, she has her own method of filing and she actually does it where she got a big box, right, with a lid. So again, it's safe, it's contained, and she throws all of her paper in throughout the entire year and then she just sorts it one day a year.
Mm.
That to me is a lot because I would be like at the end of the year, I'd be like, well, I regret this. This is not the
Yeah.
consequences of my inaction, you know?
Hmm.
I wouldn't want to do that.
Yeah.
Um, but you could, right? And so now if you think about it, if you're only filing like two, like in my case, I'm doing it like three, four times a year, or in her case, she's doing it once a year, it doesn't feel so overwhelming to keep up with that system.
I agree with you. I mean, as we've said, you do you. Uh, Whatever works best. Me, I'm like you. I would not want to do it once a year. That would be beyond that would be I would be dreading that. I'd
Yeah.
much rather do a little at a time than, a big gigantic. But hey, it works for her, so and if it works for somebody else, go for it. So that leads us up to optimization. Now, optimization happens after you've lived with the system for a while. I mean, 6 months to a year for long-term papers. It's going to take you that long to actually even get all of your papers that you would use in a year to come through into your house. Now, optimization, this could mean breaking out files into subcategories. Maybe you found a category that was too large and you were constantly digging through it. So you created some subcategories or subfolders. Maybe it's adding folders with new papers that you found you didn't even know you needed or had. Maybe you want to relabel. The category isn't making sense. Or maybe you want to add information on the outside of the folder to tell you what's inside. And of course, you can beautify. If you really want to and the system is working, you could buy better file folders or prettier file folders. Maybe buy a piece of file furniture if you wanted to. Do label maker labels, whatever makes you happy. So remember, the bottom line is the files are there to serve you. In reality, it's probably better just to write on the folders and tape business cards in them than to worry about how they look to that invisible person who is, again, snooping through your paperwork and making judgments about your standards.
Mhm. And that brings us to step five, which is the maintenance. And it's really this step, this failure to recognize that there is a maintenance step that likely got you into trouble or got you overwhelmed in the first place. I think we often treat our file cabinet like it's a one-way door or maybe like a laundry chute into the paper abyss. But in reality, files are allowed to come out permanently. It is okay. You don't have to just keep putting things in. And I know throughout the series we've been ragging on old utility bills, and there's probably some poor soul watching who's like, I have all my utility bills, you know? But if you think about it, you started saving them maybe like in 1991 because it was harder to prove you paid it back then than it is now, and you wanted that information just in case, right? And at the time, you really just intended to keep it maybe until the check cleared the bank, or maybe just for 6 months, or no more than a year, right? But what happened? Life happened. You kept being the responsible adult and you kept up that habit of putting the bill in month after month, but you never took it out. So after 6 months, it was still there. A year, it was there. 2 decades later, it's still there. So we need to get in this habit of going through our long-term paper at least once a year. Personally, I think once a year is just enough. Mary, do you agree? Like when
Yeah,
your
yeah,
system's up and working.
to get rid of things, yes, once a year, because then you really know what's come in and what needs to go out. You have the new stuff, the updated stuff, the old stuff goes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be exactly on time, but I do find that like if you tie it to an activity, it does help you remember. So you could do it with the time changes. I personally like to do it after I file my taxes because after I file my taxes, I'm like, I've seen so much paper, I just want to get rid of it all. So I know all the essential papers to file my taxes are now out, and it just is like an easy time just to go through that box. And again, because we're only keeping that small amount of long-term paper that we're actively adding to and removing from, it's much easier, you know?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So the magic isn't in copying exactly what we do. The magic is in understanding the principle. Broad categories, different types of containers, Papers that serve your actual life, not some imaginary version of your life where you might need something someday. If you followed this entire paper series with us, I want you to pause for a second. Think about this. You've shifted your mindset, you've cleared the backlog, you've simplified your active papers, you've built an emergency binder, and now organized long-term records. That's not small. That's huge, actually. Paper carries responsibility weight, sometimes even identity weight. And you just made it so much lighter. Well done.
Well said, Mary. And if you're feeling stuck anywhere in your paper system, that's completely natural. Like we said, there's so much weight and pressure put on you. So we would love for you to join one of our monthly live sessions. They're completely free where we can help you walk through any real life situations you have. And if you want more personalized support, both of us are obviously well versed in handling client paperwork. So please feel free to reach out to either of us, or you can email us at hello@lifeagogo.com. And again, that email will be in the description box below. We really hope that you have enjoyed this series, and it would really benefit us if you could just take a moment to hit the like and subscribe buttons below. And until next time, friends, cheers.
Cheers.
Bye, everyone.
Bye bye.